First up, let's get you the overall analysis on what the rail budget has really meant and whether it is correct to call it a pragmatic budget. Vivek Gupta, your first comments on the budget overall. We've been getting divided views. While some believe that it is pragmatic, at least he was not populist, even though we have 5 state elections coming up. There are others who also have expressed concern about the ability to implement and called it too ambitious. Your thoughts?
See, I think it's a very clever budget. Clever because you would recall last year, same day, we spoke about the entire opportunity to monetize tangible and intangible assets that Railways has. For the first time, I think he's spoken about revenue generation from alternative non-fare sources. And that has been brought into the thinking of the Railways in a very meaningful way for the first time. He's set out a target in the next 4 years to move from 5% to 10% and so on and so forth. So I find that very interesting.
And that's achievable and that's practical.
That's practical.
Right.
See, Railways has, so apart from revenue, what I would have liked to see a little bit more, and he's alluded to that in parts, is that all of the interesting assets of Railways, which individually you can privatize without privatizing the Railways per se, because
Sure.
I think that would politically and socially be a very difficult thing to do. I think some of that can also be achieved, which can meet his ambitious target of 7.5 lakh crores that he spoke about last year,
Right.
1.2 lakh crores that he speaks about this year.
Right.
So I think in that sense, it's a clever budget. Remember, it's the budget of a highly troubled, ailing organization at the end of the day. So it's not without challenges. I find the fact that LIC will give loans to the Railways on very favorable terms as off-budget support maybe. It's after all a support from one PSU to the Railways, which is not coming out of the budget but is coming out of a state undertaking. It'd be interesting to see what those terms are. It'll be interesting to see what innovative financing he can do.
Sure.
But overall, I find it clever because for the first time he's recognizing sources other than passenger and freight revenue.
And that's important because it's high time that you start looking outside those two basic revenue streams for the Railways, because that's clearly not worked.
Absolutely. And finally, he will also need to look at equity dilutions in parts of Railways,
Right.
e-commerce. I mean, there are lots of intangible assets that Railways possesses and tangible assets. So stations, land, e-commerce, etc., etc.
And that's where you can unlock the value and make sure you go ahead with all the kind of grand plans that he is in many
without
ways
having to
enshrined.
privatize
Without
a public
having to privatize,
utility.
which anyways
You
seems
cannot.
Impossible. Yeah. Jayajit, your thoughts clearly, because the whole issue of passenger fares, the fact that many people believe that the budget moved away from the typical script that you would hear a railway minister, announcing trains, new trains, especially in constituencies where state elections were coming up, fares one way or the other depending on what the situation is, but the fact that he decided to keep fares where they are. Some have actually criticized the move, saying that he could have hiked fares but resisted against it because of the fact that it will have obviously political compulsions. Your overall view there?
I think it's a more matured budget, and that's a word I would use. And it's in line with what happened last year also. It was directionally a more mature budget with no knee-jerk trains being announced, no trains going from nowhere to nowhere being announced, and it's more of a policy-driven budget. Even when there are new trains being announced, there are classes of trains which are being announced, not stations and not new destinations and so on.
Right, so it's not politically driven in that sense, but there is some strategy to it, there's some thought applied to announcing those new trains.
So not just politically, but it's also not a knee-jerk reaction.
Knee-jerk reaction, right.
And therefore there's a deep thought that is there. It's driven by policies, and I'm sure as it matures further, you would have trains and new stations being decided based on analytics and real data rather than political compulsions.
Okay. Those are important points coming in, but let's try and bring you now reactions of commuters, those train passengers. How do they think, how do they rate this budget? Let me now go across to Ankita, who joins us from Mumbai. We're also joined by Sam Daniel from Chennai and Rohit from Ahmedabad. Ankita, to you first. Mumbai, of course, a major hub out there. There's also talk that a railway minister is going to be speaking to the government for staggered work hours to reduce the kind of pressure there is. Share with us what the initial reaction of commuters there has been.
Right. So the response has been quite mixed actually. If you look at the positives in this budget for Mumbai, A is the fact that the number of the size of the platforms are going to be raised, which is definitely a big issue because about 10 people each day they die over here because of railway accidents, and one of the biggest reasons for that is because of the distance between the tracks, between the train as well as the platform. Another thing is the proposal of two elevated platforms, that is one from CST to Panvel and the other is from Churchgate to Virana. That will definitely help ease the traffic, ease the crowds during the peak hours. Another thing also is the fact that the fares have not been hiked. Now I have with me a few commuters here. Can you tell us about what's your take on the budget? Where do you think what's your take, positive or negative?
See, the budget is quite mixed feelings. We have quite mixed feelings. But regarding the safety issue that people hang from the doors of the railways, and also the height of the railway platform has been increased. That is much appreciable. But also the door issue is very much more, and also the hygiene on the stations is not much as we expect.
Much needs to be done on that aspect. What about you?
Actually, when the work is going on for the raising of platforms, most of them are, that's not really how you work. You have to complete the work as you started.
Safety measures are not taken.
So that is one of the...
Right. Okay. So apart from that, well, the people who are most disappointed are women, because they have been demanding for extra coaches for especially first class, because even though the entire train is crowded, it's women who suffer the most because there's hardly any space for them. So can you tell us about the problems that you all face?
The problem is that when we get into the train, the people who are gathered, they really push. So they should extend the bogie, you know. For the ladies,
yeah.
At least they should extend the bogie, and they should also, the gap between train and the platform is not good.
Okay.
Instead of getting in the train, people get on the track.
Do you have any question for our panelist?
I want to ask the question about safety issues of the people. We daily travel like animals in the train, but I want to ask what are the safety issues that have been taken for the people.
What can be done basically? So that's what they're asking. What can be done?